Evening with a Legend is a series of presentations exclusive to legends of the famous 24 Hours of Le Mans, giving us an opportunity to bring a piece of Le Mans to you. By sharing stories and highlights of the big event, you get a chance to become part of the legend of Le Mans with guests from different eras of over 100 years of racing.
Tonight, we have an opportunity to bring a piece of Le Mans to you, sharing in the legend of Le Mans with guests from different eras of over 100 years of racing. And as your host, I'm delighted to introduce Jordan Taylor, who has established himself as a formidable competitor at the 24 Hours Le Mans, showcasing his exceptional talent in endurance racing. As a longtime factory driver for Corvette Racing, Jordan has played a key role in over 8 Le Mans campaigns, contributing to podium finishes and class victories. Known for his speed, consistency, and racecraft, he has mastered the demands of the Circuit de la Sarthe, excelling in both day and night stints, and his adaptability and strategic mindset have made him a crucial asset to his teams, solidifying his reputation as one of the top endurance racers of his generation. And with that, I'm your host, Crew Chief Eric of the Motoring Podcast Network, welcoming everyone to this Evening with a Legend. So, Jordan, welcome to the show.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me on.
Well, Jordan, you're part of the next generation of Team Corvette drivers, picking up where folks like Kelly Collins and Andy Pilgrim left off. So what was going through your mind the first time you drove at Le Mans, especially in a Corvette? How did that experience shape your career or change you as a driver?
Yeah, it was amazing. Obviously, my first time going to Le Mans, kind of as a fan or a viewer, was back in 2001 and 2002 when my dad raced the Cadillac there. So that was the GM team, Cadillac and Corvette, and the hospitality was shared between Cadillac and Corvette. So my first time there, I was hanging in the hospitality with those guys like you mentioned, Kelly Collins, Oliver Gavin, Ron Fellows, all those, legendary Corvette driver names. To go there was my first time as one of those guys. It was pretty surreal. It was always kind of the goal after seeing it in person was to get there, especially with an American brand like Corvette, to represent them on a world stage like that was amazing. And yeah, the first time I was able to go was 2012, I believe, after Detroit, the Belle Isle Grand Prix. Usually Le Mans, you have this huge build up to it, but for us, Belle Isle was the week of the test day. So I raced in Belle Isle on Saturday, had to fly out that night, landed in Paris Sunday morning. I got on a helicopter with Peter Barron and Ryan Dial. We flew to the racetrack, did a little private driver's meeting over lunch, and then I was able to get in the car for the afternoon. So it was kind of thrown in at the deep end. I didn't really get to make the most of my first experience there, but yeah, just being able to drive down Mulsanne that first time with that huge loud V8 behind you, or in front of you, I guess, in the Corvette, was super cool and, a great memory.
Well, I'm sure you got that sense that Le Mans is hallowed ground. And so I'm sure you've been asked several times to compare between endurance racing in the United States and then racing at Le Mans. Do they really compare? Can you describe the unique challenges of racing at Le Mans compared to like the 24 Hours of Daytona?
They're much different style races. Le Mans, it's its own animal. Daytona obviously is an IMSA race, so for IMSA racing, you're going to have a yellow caution at some point. It's going to bunch everyone back up. It's easier to get laps back. The goal at Daytona is to stay on the lead lap or within a lap until the last 4 hours, and then you kind of go racing. So it's more of a survival race, and then you battle at the end, and you need a quick car just because it is kind of a head-to-head fight. At Le Mans, you need a quick car, but the way the race goes is you don't get those yellows to kind of bring you back together. So every second you lose, that could just accumulate over 24 hours. To kind of be on your game and focus the whole race is even more important at Le Mans. All those little mistakes you make, dropping a wheel, any issues in the pits, that time just accumulates over 24 hours. And there have been new rules coming in with some of the wave rounds and things to kind of bring that a little bit closer. Most of the year that I was there was 3 safety cars, so you could get an unlucky break and lose 2 minutes with that. So at Le Mans, you're always kind of pushing, always on the limit. In Daytona, you can kind of relax a bit, I'd say, for the first 16 to 18 hours.
So having raced at other venues in Europe and all over the world, really, how does Le Mans compare to some of the other tracks you've been to?
It's not really like anything else. That's what makes it kind of difficult. Obviously, most of it is public roads. No one gets to test on it. And it seems like every year we go there, there's some little adjustment or change to the track where either the town has changed something for the highways or, the racetrack has changed something on the Bugatti side. So yeah, I remember one year we drove down Mulsanne at the test day and there were just tons of little bits of asphalt coming up the whole way down just because they had just repaved it. But then once it was clean, the grip was super high. So that track evolution evolution over the race week and between the test day and the race week is always huge, but then you also don't know if it's going to make the car more understeer, more oversteer as it grips up. So you're always kind of on your toes. It's such a long lap. In GT cars, it's almost 4 minutes. Getting a read on a change takes a lot more time. Getting a read for high-speed corners versus low speed. Sometimes if you get traffic in the Porsche garage, like, I didn't get a read this lap. Give me another 4 minutes to get a read. So it makes changes a little bit more difficult, which means your preparation is that much more crucial, kind of leading into it to be kind of as prepared as possible with the car that you want to have for race week.
So your first Le Mans was in a C6R, and then you moved to the C7 and the C8, obviously as a factory driver for Corvette. So can you talk about the differences in the cars? Is there one generation of the Corvette that you prefer over the other?
I mean, I had the most success in the C8, so that's probably the one I'd say I enjoyed the most. The C7, obviously winning Le Mans is an amazing memory. And the C6, I'd say, was maybe the least memorable just because it was kind of my first introduction into proper professional GT racing. It was a very difficult car to drive. It was very finicky with how you had to drive, with the driving style, very unique driving style that, it took time to kind of wrap your head around. And kind of going from the C6 to the C7, I'd say it kept a bit of that trend where the driving style was very unique. Some guys didn't adjust to it. They had some IndyCar guys come test it, other, renowned sports car drivers, and it just required this weird driving style that if it clicked, it clicked. If it didn't, it just didn't make any sense. And sometimes you'd get in it and it wouldn't make sense. And then other days you'd get in it and it would click. So the C7, I really enjoyed once I understood the driving style. And then the C8 was more natural. I'd say it felt more like a natural race car with the mid-engine. With the weight distribution, it just made more sense naturally to drive it. The C7, you just had to be so smooth with everything. I think with all the weight on the front of the car, you had to be so smooth with your inputs, especially with the brake pedal. Anything you did with kind of your feet could really upset it really quickly. And I think each guy over the years had one spin in that car that just never made sense. I had one at the Road America test that I just had no idea what happened. Antonio had one at Long Beach, didn't know what happened. I think Ollie had one somewhere and Tommy had one somewhere. So it was also a bit of a finicky car, but it won a lot of races. It won a lot of championships. It won Le Mans for us in 2015, so can't complain too much about it.
All right, Jordan, I got a question from the audience here. Any favorite Doug Feehan stories from your Corvette racing days?
I love Doug Feehan. Let me see. I've been around Doug probably since I was 4 or 5 years old, just because he was involved with my dad's stuff. Actually, I think he was involved with my dad the year I was born as well, so I've known Doug my entire life, and I can't remember. I think it was Petit Le Mans one year, and Antonio Garcia was qualifying our car, and I was sitting next to my teammate Nicky Katzberg, and Doug must have been like down below. And Antonio, we weren't very quick all practice, and then Antonio goes P1, and we just hear Doug from down low take that, bitch. And we're like, what was that? It was so pure, it was that's so Doug. He just loves winning, loves Corvette, loves the brands, and is so passionate. I think that's my favorite Doug Feehan story.
All right, so let's compare green apples to red apples. Last year, you drove a Ferrari mid-engine car. So how did that compare to the C8?
Yeah, quite different. So the C8 car that I drove was the GTLM GTE version, so it was designed for that class. So it wasn't designed for the spec Michelin that it runs on or the spec Goodyear that it runs on in WEC. When we transitioned between, what would that have been, 2021 and 2022 to kind of GT3 rules and IMSA, the car didn't really fit the class very well. So the way it handled, the way we had to set up the car geometry-wise to get it to work with that tire, it always felt a bit funky. So I think when we started development, I was there for the development of the new car, the GT3 Corvette. As soon as that one kind of rolled out, it felt way better instantly on that spec tire just because the car was designed for it. I think the way the GT3 rules are written, every car that's kind of built to that homologation, it's a pretty tight window of what you can do. Everyone's got the same sort of Bosch ABS system. Everyone runs the same tire. You're supposed to be in this similar weight range, similar downforce range. So all the GT3 cars, I think, feel relatively similar. It's just going to depend on how the BOP positions you with aero levels and power levels and what that feels like. When I jumped into Ferrari last year, I thought it was going to be this crazy new thing to feel, but once you start pushing and getting to the limit of it, it felt relatively similar. I think with it being a mid-engine as well and probably just overall weight and aero levels, it was pretty similar, but I say drivability of the engine was much different. Obviously, much different type of engine and build, but Yeah, it was a good experience. Obviously, all my GT experience has been in GM products, whether it's a Camaro, Cadillac GT3 car, or Corvette. To try something different like a Ferrari, especially at a place like Le Mans, was super special.
So how did that come together? I mean, you've been with Corvette for so long. Why a Ferrari?
Well, I wasn't planning on going to Le Mans, and a buddy of mine, Marco Sorensen, who races for Aston Martin, reached out and said, basically, like, hey, if you want to do Le Mans, I know some guys who are looking for, a gold or platinum rated driver. And it was this great family, Johnny and Conrad Larson. And I think it was going to be Johnny's last race. So we spoke on the phone a few times, and I flew out to Paul Ricard to test with them. And I just loved them. It kind of reminded me of my family, with my dad being in racing and Conrad being super young and up and coming. It was a fun experience. Obviously, anytime you can do Le Mans is something you want to jump after. And it was with AF Corsa, who obviously has a lot of success. It's a team that I've raced against many years, especially at Le Mans. I think a couple of years that we were finished second at Le Mans, they won. And the year that we won, they finished second. It's a team also I can kind of learn from and see, where their strengths and weaknesses are, and something that I can kind of take away from it.
Well, I'm glad you brought up teammates, teamwork, things like that. I mean, that obviously factors into the success of Le Mans. Let's maybe compare and contrast AF Corsa to GM. How are the teams different, if you can talk about that? And what makes for a good, strong driver lineup? How are they choosing? Obviously they chose you to come and drive for them, but how much does that play into the success as well?
The teams were much different. A lot more coffee at AF Corsa and espresso and pasta. No, like I was so used to being there with Corvette over the years, and everyone speaking English, and it feeling like I'm having my little America experience over in France. And my brother had been with so many different teams, and I'm always hearing his experiences of language barriers and food issues and things like that. So for me, it was a cultural change. I'd never been with a non-American team. So for me, that was interesting. It was just a much different mentality from the team, different way to approach practice sessions, different way to approach the race, strategy wise, different way to organize meetings, logistics, communications. It was just interesting to see it from a whole different perspective and see why they're successful. But yeah, picking drivers is always a difficult thing. Corvette has done a very good job over the years. Same as Wing Taylor Racing. I think they both have a very similar mentality, where you take the personality of the driver as a big part of it, making sure that they fit in personality-wise. There's no clashes with egos or anything like that. You have to be pretty easygoing and friendly and relatively lighthearted, where you don't take your job too seriously, but serious enough to get the job done. So that's, I think, one of the most important criteria that both Corvette and WTR take into it. And I think that's been a big recipe for the success. Obviously, there's a lot of very fast and competitive drivers, but if they're creating friction in the team, it's going to drag everyone down. So you can find the personality and a driver that's fast. That's the perfect recipe. And I think when you look at when I joined AF Corsa last year, obviously with the way the GT3 rules are, you can only have one gold or platinum. So by that time, they were pretty limited on who they could pick. So they were asking around, and Marco was able to recommend me. And the personality was a big part of it. Even Johnny told me, Johnny Larson, that he wanted to talk to me, get to know me a little bit before he kind of made that commitment. Just because he also wanted to have a good experience at Le Mans. He didn't want to have a driver come in and only care about himself or setting fast laps. And thankfully, it all went well. They're a great family, and good to see that different teams have that approach as well. And it's not just a driver out there to set fast laps and kind of out there for themselves.
So you alluded to it earlier, Le Mans is a high stakes environment. And even in your time, there's been rules changes since 2012 to today. One of them, we're talking about teammates still, we're talking about the changes in the teams. Even minimum drive times and maximum drive times have changed over the last 15 years or so. So can you walk us through what the strategy is like of managing the pits and the pit stops and managing your fatigue and your health and mental well-being? And how do you prepare for a race like Le Mans, or even the 24 hours of Daytona, or any of these endurance races?
The first one or two times you do a 24-hour, it's probably the worst experience you're going to have, hopefully, and you learn from it. Especially Le Mans, you have the whole week there, and you do the test day on Sunday, you have scrutineering Friday, Saturday. So you've already done 2 days of media by the time you get in the car. You get to drive a little bit on Sunday, and then you have Monday, Tuesday to kind of get back into media stuff and meetings. You have the driver's parade on Friday. So you have all this stuff outside the car that's mentally draining you and kind of distracting you from what you're there to actually do. So the first two times you do it, or first time for sure that you do it, you're just mentally exhausted and drained. And by the time you do actually get to the race car, you're like, this is what I'm actually here to do. Your head's not really fully in the game like it should be. So that's the first thing I think a young driver learns doing these events is You got to do your media commitments and everything outside the car, but your job is to be 100% when you do get in the car. So that's something that you kind of learn, I think, over a career, is how to balance those two things. And at WTR, we do a lot of driver science work with a doctor named Dr. Ferguson. He's doing a lot of driver studies just to kind of understand the mental fatigue and physical fatigue. So we wear sweat rate patches, heart rate monitors, body temp sensors. He's measuring everything pretty much before we get in the car and after we get in the car. And he can kind of tell us, our sweat rate and if we've been drinking enough. And the goal is to have that live for the telemetry for the engineers to kind of monitor our sweat rate to keep us ahead of things for hydration. Because if you do a 3-hour stint and you become into this massively dehydrated state, it's going to take you a long time to get back to that. And you might not have enough time to get that hydration back in by the next time you get in. So we're still constantly learning kind of what each driver needs. My brother and I are obviously brothers, but we have much different sweat rates. So he needs a lot more sodium. He sweats out between 4 and 5 pounds per hour. I sweat out between 2 and 3 pounds per hour. So understanding each driver's needs is super important. And it's been nice to have, Dr. Ferguson coming into there with us and supporting that. So we think about it a little bit, but he can kind of just tell us, hey, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing this to stay on top of things. I think we're a little bit ahead of the game than a lot of other guys with, I'd say, the nutrition side, just because kind of our hobbies include some like triathlon training and things like that, where we can kind of practice those things with hydration and nutrition on our weekends. And then when we go to the racetrack, we're better prepared.
Well, this leads us into a conversation about the 2023 season, the 100th anniversary of Le Mans, and your involvement as a driver coach in the Garage 56 program. That's what everybody probably wants to hear about. So let's do a deep dive into that experience, what it was like putting it together, what it meant for you, what it meant for America and for American fans.
It was super cool. I think when I kind of signed up to be a part of it, I definitely didn't think it was going to be as big of a story as it was. I don't think anyone involved thought it would be as big of a story as it was. But yeah, really early on, I don't know how far before the program was official, Chad Knaus reached out, just kind of picked my brain about Le Mans, just to kind of asking generic questions. Like a month later, I was like, hey, if you guys are ever thinking about something, like I'd love to be involved in some way. So I don't know, it must have been, 6 or 8 months later, he's asking more questions and I'm like, all right, what's going on? And then it gets announced that it's happening. And then John Doonan from IMSA called and was like, hey, we'd like to have you involved in some way, maybe as a reserve driver or advisor. And I say, yeah, like anything to be involved, I'd love to be involved with it, just because I'm not racing there. It'll be a much different experience. I'll get to test the car with them and go as a reserve driver. And then when I got to the actual driver announcement in Daytona, they told me that I'd be quoted as the driver coach. I didn't know that going into it, but it was pretty funny, just title to have, when the drivers are Jenson Button, Mike Rockefeller, and Jimmy Johnson, 3 guys who definitely don't need driver coaches. But it was an amazing experience. Obviously, jumping in the car early days and testing at Daytona was fun. Then we went to Sebring for a 24-hour test through the night. We did tests at Coda, back to Sebring, and every time you get in the car, there'd be some big jump in performance. And it was always something new. But it was just fun to be part of something where there's no rule set, there's no homologation that you have to stick to. There's a general rule of what we have to stick within. But as far as car development, you can just do whatever you want to try and make it faster and more reliable. So that's fun as a driver, where we've kind of lost that in professional racing, where once you kind of build a car, that's your car and it's homologated, especially in GT3, you can't touch anything. So to kind of be able to be hands-on and as a driver say like, hey, I think this would be cool if we could do something here. And then next week they've built a part for it or developed something or developed 3 parts for it. And they're like, let's try this one. Let's try this one. What about this one? And I think just the involvement of Hendrick, NASCAR, and General Motors, just 3 massive companies that are pushing performance and kind of excellence. And then by the time we got to Le Mans, we still probably didn't expect it to be as popular as it was, just because it was so close to us. Like we were so used to seeing the car and hearing it and being involved with it. At that point, it was just a race car and it was loud, it was cool. But we didn't think the kind of reaction would be as amazing as it was when we did get to the tracks. Obviously, the car ran very well. It was super fast, in the race, leading the GT pack for most of it until we had a little gearbox issue near the end. But the car made it to the finish. I think proved a lot of people wrong, thinking that, a NASCAR can't go to Le Mans and be competitive. I don't think it was a pure NASCAR. By that point, it was pretty far developed. Super cool program. Probably one of the cooler experiences I've had in my life.
Being there to see it live in person and seeing the reactions of the people. I mean, it was definitely mixed. A lot of folks were like, oh, they're never going to make it.
Yeah.
They're going to run out of tires and blah, blah, blah. blah. You fired that thing up, you could hear it pretty much all the way around Le Mans. But at the end, when you guys cross the finish line at the end of the 24, I mean, people are saluting and they're cheering and they're crying and there's American flags. And it was the most amazing spectacle you had ever seen. Hang your hat on that. Be proud of that because it's a long time coming that we see, that type of ingenuity, and to take something out of NASCAR to bring to endurance is absolutely incredible. And to your point, I don't know how similar it is to, what is it, the car of tomorrow that I guess they're quoting as the next generation NASCAR, but I'd like to see more of those kinds of cars running around. Do you think there'll be a homologated version of that car coming back to Le Mans or something else like it?
Not that I've heard. I mean, that car is probably pretty expensive at this point to make. I think they poured quite a bit of money into it. I mean, at the end of the day, it had carbon brakes, paddle shift had a ton of electronics in it. We did a lot of tire testing with Goodyear to kind of develop a tire for it. But yeah, I mean, probably relatively, the car probably isn't that expensive compared to, a hypercar or something like that. But I know it would be super cool to see, 20 or 25 of them out there racing each other. There was a design to have a rear wing on it, which would have made it way more efficient drag versus downforce. So I think if we were able to develop it properly into, a race car, it could be properly quick. And there were some limitations that we were on that you had to keep the spoiler to kind of keep it more NASCAR and very similar look to it. But yeah, I would love to see more of them out there. It was one of the more enjoyable cars I've driven. We took it to Dakota to do a lap before the MotoGP race. Took it to VIR to do the lightning lap for car and driver. And those were just such fun driving experiences. The purity of the car is something you don't get as much these days. Obviously, there's a lot of electronics, driver aids in GT3 and hypercars that are kind of supporting the driver. And when you get in that thing, it's just a raw machine and you're just connected to the ground through this crazy car. And for the driver's experience, it was much more raw and emotional.
And to your point from earlier, I think the BOP probably would have killed that car and wouldn't have done as well as it did, or wouldn't have stood out as much as it did. So there's also that to consider. But I don't think it's a direct catalyst for this because the talks were already happening, but we saw even last year a deeper merger between the IMSA field and the WEC field. And you had cars from Lexus and BMW and all sorts of other brands showing up at Le Mans. So for a lot of us that started really paying more attention to the racing, you're like, oh, I recognize those. It's not just Italian and French and German stuff out there. In your eyes, how is that working out, bringing more of the IMSA fleet to Le Mans with the balance of power?
For me, it's great. I mean, I grew up an IMSA guy, watching Le Mans every year kind of on TV as a kid. So for me, that's my perfect schedule is an IMSA year, Daytona, Sebring, Petit, and all of our American races and Le Mans. So to kind of get that eligibility for us to kind of race there with our cars is a dream come true. It's what we were always hoping for when I was young and growing up, is to have that ability to do both in the same car and the same team. It was something that my dad was able to do through the 90s, where if he won Daytona or Sebring or Petit or the championship, he would get an entry to Le Mans, which he did in the late 90s, like 95 through 98. So yeah, for us, when those rules changed and there was some eligibility for our GTP class to go join the hypercars and the GT3 class in IMSA to join the GT3 class there, was perfect and getting entries that way. So it's weird to kind of be involved with it as a driver. I think I'm so used to looking at it from an outsider's perspective. And when you watch, those LMP1 fields racing for an overall win, you kind of put those guys on a different level when you're watching them. And now it's the same level that we're racing at. Those guys are coming to race with us at Daytona and some of the bigger races here. And then we're going to race them kind of on more of their home ground. So it's weird to kind of be a part of it. As a fan, I still look at it as this much different level, just because it's something that I grew up watching. This year, going there for the first time as an overall win is going to be an interesting feel, but it's something that I'm excited about just because I've been in the car now all year, and it's something that I'm comfortable with being in the car, and it's just going to be hopefully another race on the calendar, just a little bit more of an important one.
Well, you mentioned the, let's call it LMP1, GTP, hybrid, hypercar class, whatever it is now. It feels like it's changing all the time. How do we entice more of the, let's label them the obscure brands, to come race in the United States? Let's take Porsche off the table because they'll race anywhere. But how do we bring Peugeot over? How do we get Ferrari to bring the 499 to race here in the States?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to have them. There's so many good cars in the class now, and the WEC hypercar field is so strong and so deep. I think most of the entries are going to WEC just because you are guaranteed those Le Mans entries. And it's such a big budget to pick one or the other that I think, at least initially, for them, it's smart to go there just because they know they're going to get a Le Mans entry. And if you just join them, so there's a bit of a question mark as if you'll get invited there. So I would love it. I think there's been talk about Risi getting a Ferrari here and Peugeot. I haven't heard much of a customer talk with them, but with Ford coming and Genesis, it would be great to have some of those come over here, even if it's just for endurance races like Daytona, Sebring, and Petit are classics. Those are still world-renowned events that everyone wants to win. So yeah, it would be fantastic. I don't know how to entice them more. I think when people come and race in America on our tracks, especially those ones like Sebring and Petit and Watkins Glen, those are some pure racetracks that drivers really enjoy driving. And I know from European drivers that have come to America and only been here for a year or two, they just love our racetracks just because they still have that old school feel where most of the European tracks have kind of developed those track limit violations type designs. And for a driver, it's difficult to kind of find those limits when there's extra asphalt there that you want to use and then you get a penalty for it. I love that we kept that raw feel to our tracks in America, and I think the drivers appreciate and respect that as well.
So what do you think has been your most memorable moment at Le Mans, and why does it stand out to you?
Definitely winning Le Mans in 15. That whole week was kind of a whirlwind. It was the year that the sister car, the other Corvette, the 63 car that year with Magnussen had a throttle stuck in the force curve and he had a massive crash and then they were unable to fix it. So we were down to one car for the race. And obviously that was the first time in history that Corvette Racing had entered the race with just one car. So being one of the three drivers kind of representing the brand, when you've got a million people there supporting you from management and upper levels of GM and obviously all the team personnel. And it's just such a ordeal to get there. And now there's only one bullet in the gun is us. And it's up to us to kind of not make mistakes and get the job done. So heading into it, it was terrifying just to know that. But it was amazing to have the support. Both sides of the garage, 63 and 64 engineers swapped off through the race. So one stint I would have Chuck was the 4-car engineer in my ear. The next stint's Kyle from the 3-car would be in my ear. So it was really good how the team split duties and used everyone kind of to their fullest. And Ryan Briscoe was in the 3-car, stayed the whole race, even though he wasn't racing, and was kind of always keeping us up to date with what was going on between stints and how we were doing. So I think the way that week went and just kind of feeling down and out of it before the race even started to then be in the hunt come Sunday morning. And then when the Ferrari fell out with like an hour or two to go, we knew we just needed to survive from that point. It was just a massive weight off of everyone's shoulders, I think. And then, yeah, obviously just bursting into tears after the race. And then I'll never forget waiting in the stairwell to go up on the podium. And Oliver Gavin had his wrong shoes on in the car. So he was radioing, get my podium shoes ready, get my podium shoes to the guys to want someone to go find his proper shoes to wear on the podium. Super cool experience, obviously, walking onto that podium, seeing all the people down there, all the blowhorns that you kind of see in the videos. Raising the American flag with the anthem was super cool. And yeah, just having those memories and pictures and videos to kind of look back on is always a nice thing.
So you brought up something that I don't think I've asked a pro driver in quite a while. Talking about Oliver Gavin and his podium shoes. Do you have any superstitions, any rituals, anything that gets you prepared for the race?
Nothing good. I think Ollie's thing was he had a sponsor for shoes and he was driving with a different brand shoes that he didn't want to go on the podium with. I think I'm pretty basic. I think I'm like right glove, right shoe first. Yeah, I'd say if I put my left glove on first or something happens, I would probably take it back off and start with my right hand again, just to kind of take that out of play just in case.
So biggest oops moment, it doesn't necessarily have to be at Le Mans, but if there is one at Le Mans, what did you learn from it?
Yeah, it was at Le Mans. It was my first ever proper crash in a race car was at Le Mans 2012. It was at that test day that I was talking about where we flew over the night of the test and then I was in the car right after lunch. So it was my first time there, first time experiencing the track. You needed to do 10 laps at the test day to qualify for race week as a rookie driver back then. So I go out, I'm doing my run. I'm just going to do a 10-lap run just to make sure I qualify. And I get to like lap 8. And then they do a full course yellow simulation to kind of see how all the systems are working. So we do a full course yellow and I'm driving around, kind of looking around and rating the guys like what I'm seeing and how cool is this? And then it goes green again. I do lap 9 and then I do lap 10. And then they're like, all right, stay out, do one more lap. And I was going to do 11 laps. And on lap 11, I spun in the Porsche curves and hit the wall. And I hadn't crashed a car until then in my whole career, which like, no one really believed. So I crashed and I was like, wow, like I destroyed the car. It felt like such a big crash. And then I'm like, sorry, guys, the car is destroyed as I'm sitting in it. And then they come tow me out and DJ from the team comes and is like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm sorry, I destroyed the car. He's like, you could have driven this back. And I was like, no way. It was a huge crash. And then they got the car back. A couple of body panels were damaged, but the car was still straight. All the wheels were straight. No suspension damage. So they said if that happens in the race, like if you don't drive that car back, just don't bother coming back because the car was perfectly fine. So it was an oops moment, obviously crashing, but it was also a good like learning experience. It was like, wow, these cars are pretty strong. If they could take a hit like that, and I should have driven it back. Good learning moment. And I'll never forget, Ian Magnussen came up afterwards and I was looking at the car and felt bad, obviously. I must have been like 20 or 21 years old. And I felt bad that I crashed their car. And he's like, it's not your first crash. It won't be your last crash. And I'm like, yeah, it was my first crash, but hopefully it's my last one for a little while.
So a lot of drivers have said that Le Mans changed them. The experience was so profound. It was so different than what they were used to. It might have been the first time that they had ever raced in Europe. And obviously in the old days, there wasn't a lot to go on. There wasn't videos to watch. There weren't simulators to test on and train on and things like that. Do you think Le Mans changed you as a driver? Did you take something home to the States and apply that to your racing here?
Yeah, it's a much different experience there. Like we were talking about at the beginning, where you kind of have to stay focused at all times through the race because any kind of second you lose is accumulating over the race distance. One of the years we were, laps down and I was driving around. The straights are so long, especially in a GT car, where you can feel like your mind will wander a little bit just because you're just flat out in sixth gear for such a long time. And by the time you get to the next chicane or Mulsanne or down to Indianapolis, got to kind of click your brain back on and lock back in to kind of be on a limit for the brake zone and for that corner. And I'll never forget finishing that stint and being like, wow, my mental kind of focus and fatigue wasn't good there. And thankfully, we were kind of out of the race that year. We weren't even competing. We were just laps down doing laps. And I was like, I can never kind of let that happen again where I'm letting my mind kind of wander. And that's something you don't get. I've never experienced anywhere else. I think it's because Le Mans is so big. And with it being 56 cars and in the GT class, I think that was one of the years when there weren't many LMP1 cars. It was at night. You could be driving around in the pitch black, not see a car for like 30 minutes if the pit weekend is doing that. So you're out there in the pitch black driving by yourself. It basically feels like you're driving on the highway between two cities. And I'll always remember kind of getting out of the car and being like, I got to make sure that never happens if we're actually in the race, because if we were in the race, that would have been a bad situation. So that was a big learning experience. That's something I'm glad I had it because it's a good realization to make sure that it doesn't happen. But if that's something that Le Mans is the only place you kind of get that feeling where you can kind of be all by yourself, and it's a unique experience.
If you could change any aspect about racing at Le Mans, is that something you would change? And I bring that in reference to some of the older drivers that they used to complain about the pits until the pits got changed. And then, the Mulsanne changed in the late 80s, early 90s. So it's seen a lot of evolution, but you're not done racing at Le Mans. There's something when you go there, you're like, man, I really wish they would just change this corner or do this thing. Or maybe it's something as simple. It's a squeaky door and going into one of the rooms or something. What would you change about Le Mans?
I mean, there could be more bathrooms in the pit lane. That would be nice. Yeah, the bathroom situation isn't great. I feel bad for the crew guys who are kind of locked in there for the whole thing. I'd say track-wise, there's obviously been a lot of evolution. I'd say during my career there, obviously the Porsche curves have changed quite a bit. After Magnussen had that crash in the wall, Duval had a crash in the one on the left, and they kind of pushed all that back. A lot of the track limit stuff has changed, kind of out of Tete Rouge, and the Ford chicanes changed a bit. I'm more a fan of the old school stuff where I like that kind of more on the edge feel, less track limits violations, keeping that kind of risk versus reward feel to the racetrack. I understand the safety aspect is a huge part of it, and there were some big crashes, but I like to leave it a little bit more in the driver's hands rather than the official's hands, forcing them to make those calls when they have to make, a track limits call for lap time or a track limits call due to a pass. And kind of when you get into the night at Le Mans, it's so dark and there's so many places you can make up a little bit of an advantage. The officials can't get everything. So if someone finds a second here, a second there, that's going to add up. And one year in the Dunlop chicane, the first one, one of the manufacturers claimed that they had cold tires on every outlap and they would just straight line it and make up, 3 or 4 seconds every outlap. And you're like, if you put a gravel trap there, they're not doing that. They're making the corner and, the manufacturer's saying, we're struggling with cold tires on our outlaps, so we can't do anything about it. So I think putting it in the driver's hands and giving us that possibility and the teams that possibility, they're going to maximize that and push those limits. And I think if you kind of take that out of the driver's hands and make it more of a black and white rule, it would just make everything a little bit cleaner, I think.
Well, Le Mans is one of those tracks that it's sort of tough to get practice laps on. That's one of the things I've heard from a lot of drivers. And it's a once a year event, realistically, and you're of a generation where you spend a lot of time on the simulator. So who's gotten it right? What's your favorite sim for Le Mans? Is it iRacing? Is it LMU? Is it one of the other ones? What do you use to practice your laps for Le Mans?
Yeah, I practice on iRacing most of the time. I enjoy that just because you can get out there with traffic, and if you find a good like hosted session, there's 60 cars out there and you can get a feel for where to pass cars, where cars are passing you, where to place your car to kind of defend a little bit better. For me, it's less about the absolute like driving experience and lap time gain. It's more about the flow of traffic and passing and getting that raceability out of it, because we get to go to, our super expensive simulators with Delar and Cadillac and GM and spend days on that thing to kind of perfect our lap time and performance. When I'm home, I like to kind of get that racing aspect, and I'll hop in there with our teammates, with Wayne Taylor Racing guys. And I mean, it's a great place to practice racecraft. I remember when iRacing first came out, I would always hop on there and find guys like Will Power or Dale Earnhardt Jr. And if you start racing with them, you start learning something that is probably they're doing on the real racetracks. And that's kind of invaluable information that you're probably never, like I'm never going to get it from Will Power. I never race against him. So you can learn something from a guy you're never going to race against. And you're not going to use it against him, obviously, but it's something you can use against someone else. Or if you kind of see that on the racetrack and you need to defend for it, maybe you've defended that guy in iRacing a little bit before to kind of understand those strengths and weaknesses. So yeah, I love getting on there and racing with new people. You can always learn something, especially the sim drivers these days are next level of how good they are. I'm not fast anymore on there, but at least I can understand a bit of racecraft.
Jordan, that's the perfect segue into our next question, which really has to do with up and coming and young drivers that are holding Le Mans as part of their crown jewels that they want to collect. So if you could share some advice for rookies, up and comers, people who are working their way up through the system, and this applies to racing in general, what do you feel are some of the challenges that they need to overcome, they need to address, maybe they need to acknowledge, like you said, like you learned from Le Mans and took home with you? How do these folks prepare for their journey to Le Mans?
Yeah, I think the good thing about these days is you have so much kind of at your hands with video and onboard and past races, simulators like we were talking about iRacing. My always go-to is I start watching old races. Like we're going to Detroit. I've watched last year's Detroit. I've watched the qualifying session. I've watched all the onboards from the different cars. And I think it's the best way to prepare, just watching other people do it and see it from a different perspective. It's a lot easier to pick things out when you watch from a different perspective. Even myself, like if I have onboard of my own, I'll go and watch it after the fact and see stuff that maybe you don't see in the moment. So I think the first thing is to start watching it from the outside, watch old races, watch old events, watch onboards, and then hop on a simulator and get up to speed on the track. And like we were saying, obviously there's a lap time part of it, but I think there's also a racecraft part of it. And if you're new to the track, my always go-to thing is, especially on a sim, is you find the fast guys and drive around them, because you're going to learn good tendencies and good habits from those guys. And if you're following guys around similar to your pace and you're, a little bit off the pace, you're not going to learn as much. So you kind of push yourself into the deep end a little bit and force yourself to kind of learn from the fast guys and understand what they're doing. But going from virtual world to real world is definitely different. Obviously, the track is a little daunting. It's very old school with the old school guardrails down Mulsanne. The speeds are so high down the straights. Force curves are crazy fast. I think when you get there in real life, it's a little bit of like a reset. It was like, okay, this is Le Mans. Like this is serious. There was a lot of risk to get lap time out here. The conditions are always changing. I think the more you can prepare ahead of time with watching those things where, you're watching dry footage, watch some wet footage, watch some changing conditions, see where the puddles stay, see where the lines of guys are using in the rain, and as it's drying up, what corners are staying wet the longest. The more you can learn ahead of time, the better prepared you're going to be there, and the more relaxed you'll feel going into it that first time you hit the track, because it'll feel way more familiar to you if you've studied enough.
All right, Jordan, I got a question from the audience here. This one feels a little personal. Scott writes, I haven't seen Rodney in a while. Did he retire?
He hasn't retired. He's just been a little lazy, I think. Yeah, it's been a while since I think he's popped up. I can't even remember the last time. He's still around now. He'll come out at some point.
So let's talk about what's next. 2025, Le Mans is right around the corner. Are you back in the seat of a vet? Any plans to jump up to LMP1? What's going on?
It was actually announced today we'll be there, Wayne Taylor Racing and Cadillac in the Mobile One Cadillac GTP car. So that's super exciting. It'll be my first time there going for the overall win. I'll be with my brother Ricky and Philippe Albuquerque, who's my brother's full-time teammate in the 10 car in IMSA. So he's had obviously a ton of experience there. I think he was there overall with Audi back in 2015. Ricky has a lot of experience there in LMP2. It'll be my first time there in a prototype. like we were talking about, I'm watching lots of prototype onboard to kind of understand. I think going there with having a GT background, I kind of understand where the prototypes pass. So like now putting myself in a prototype, I need to kind of understand where to make those moves. And then I also need to kind of bring into it where not to make those moves, where to be a little bit easier on a GT car, because I know if I do that, make that move, I'm putting myself at risk because I've seen it from the GT's side. So yeah, I'm excited about it. It's obviously a big event for the team. It's Wayne Taylor Racing's first time going there. Our technical director, Brian's been there with my brother one year in LP2. So we've got lots of little bits of information leading into it. But I think once we get there, there's still a lot to learn. But we've got good teammates with Action Express, who's been there the last 2 years with Cadillac, and Joda now, who's joined Cadillac this year in WEC. They obviously have a lot of success there in the past, and it's someone we can kind of rely on a little bit once we get there for race week to kind of bounce ideas off of and everything.
How different is that car compared to the one that you've run here in the States?
It's pretty similar. We shook down our Le Mans car in Indianapolis at Putnam Park, and the car itself is pretty much the same. There's just some electronic differences and different stickers on the car to make it fit into the rules, but we don't use slow zones in America, and some of the limitations on the data transfer to the telemetry is a little bit more limited on the WEC side. Just getting into the habit of, understanding what the dash is going to look like, making sure all the slow zone stuff works at that test was important, just so when we do get to Le Mans, like we were talking about, it's such limited running, we want to make the most of it, so we don't want to kind of be fiddling with all those little things.
So if you could race any car in the current lineup last couple of years at Le Mans, not offending anybody, any sponsors or your dad, what would you run at Le Mans if you were king for a day?
Watching last year, the sound of the Cadillac, I don't think you could beat that. So I feel pretty lucky to be in it. This was a car that, even when I was racing a different car last year, the sound of the Cadillac is hard to beat. And obviously coming from Corvette, a lot of motorsport has lost that sound aspect of the V8. I'm very happy that Cadillac didn't go down the turbo route like most of the guys did and has that kind of pure rumble. So I'm lucky that I can say it, even if it's a political answer, but it's still a good, fair answer, I'd say.
So what would Rodney pick?
He's definitely an American guy, so he's picking the Cadillac.
Now that the Le Mans Classic is back, do you see yourself participating in any of those events? And if so, that's sort of an open question too. What would you pick over all the different generations of Le Mans cars that are out there in a vintage endurance race?
Yeah, so I drove a Greenwood Corvette at Daytona and Laguna, and that was one of the coolest and craziest cars I've ever driven. It was Garage 56 like times 20 with how pure the car was. It had so much torque at Laguna that I think I only used third and fourth gear the whole track. You could leave the hairpin in third gear and still spin the tires and then just shift to fourth. I don't know if I'd want to race that one at Le Mans. I think that would be terrifying. I think at Daytona we were doing almost 200 miles an hour. And we don't even do that in the hypercars these days. So to do that at Le Mans would be very scary. Even accelerating at Daytona, you wouldn't feel downforce, you would feel lift as you were accelerating. Those guys were insanely brave to be racing that around Le Mans back then, especially with the safety, the lighting at night, where it's probably raining as well. So I probably wouldn't choose that to race in the Classic. I was a big fan of like the Group C era. I didn't grow up watching, but I think when I was old enough to kind of watch and understand race cars, I've got a bunch of books downstairs of those cars. And like we were talking earlier, like I'm a big fan of car development and kind of more of open rule book. And the books that I have was every year the manufacturer brought their car, and it was always these new cool aero updates and evolutions of things and engine updates. And it's something we don't see as much these days. Those cars were super cool. I think like the Silk Cut Jag was a beautiful car. That's something I would probably jump at to drive it someday.
You got to listen to Hurley's episode. He'll tell you otherwise.
Oh, really? Was it not good? Oh, no.
In his opinion, I'm going to put it in air quotes.
Okay.
That said, what's next, Jordan? What's next for you outside of Le Mans? What's next for Wayne Taylor Racing?
For us, obviously, it's our first year back with Cadillac, so it's been, I'd say, a lot of learning this year. I think Laguna was our best race performance-wise. If we're just comparing with our teammates in Action Express, I think we were a bit behind them at Sebring and Long Beach, but Laguna, we felt kind of on top of the game. So I think for the rest of the year, we're definitely excited for Le Mans. It's a big opportunity for everyone on the team and kind of representing Cadillac, especially as an American driver going there. Representing an American brand is always special. So there's nothing too new for me. I'm excited just to be back racing prototypes and have the opportunity to race at Le Mans overall. So I'm not looking too far ahead. I'm very much focused on Le Mans. I leave tomorrow to go up to Indianapolis to sit in our simulator for 2 days for Le Mans prep or fully focused on it. I'm not looking too far past June at this point, I don't think.
Well, at this point, Jordan, we would turn the mic over to one of the representatives from the IMRRC to give a couple of words. But in this case, that happens to be you. You're the 2025 membership spokesperson for the International Motor Racing Research Center. So would you like to say a couple words?
Yeah, it's a huge honor to be involved with the Research Center. I went there, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. There was an event during the Watkins Glen 6-hour. And then Ricky and I actually went back up for the historic event on the old Watkins Glen track with maybe like 40s or 50s themed cars. Like we've been talking, like I'm a big fan of kind of the history and more of the old school stuff. So to kind of be involved in the Research Center is perfect for me. I love the history of our sport. I think we can learn so much from it. And I don't want to go too far away from it. In the future, I think there's so many good lessons that we need to keep and remember. And I think having that place to go to kind of have those books and those memories to kind of reflect on and not forget kind of where we came from is super important. So after Le Mans is our Watkins Glen 6-hour weekend. So I'll go over there, see everyone during the race weekend. And I think we'll probably have a few more events planned in the future. But yeah, it's a huge honor to be involved with it. I'm a huge racing fan. If I wasn't a driver, I'd still be, a big racing fan and advocate for it. It's kind of best of both worlds for me.
And on that note, I'm going to pass the microphone to David Lowe, ACO USA president, for some closing thoughts.
Jordan, on behalf of the ACO, as well as the ACO USA members that were present tonight and will be following up watching online, thank you so much for an incredible evening. On a personal note, typically the legends and most recently have been much older than you. So for you sharing your perspective was quite entertaining and interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Jordan's Le Mans performances continue to reflect his dedication to excellence in one of motorsport's most grueling and prestigious events. From his unforgettable stints behind the wheel to the teamwork and strategy that defined this iconic race, Jordan's insights give us a true look into what it takes to thrive on motorsport's biggest stage. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow Jordan on social media, where you can find him on Instagram and Twitter at Jordan10Taylor for a mix of racing updates, behind-the-scenes moments, and his signature sense of humor. You can also check out his official website at www.jordantaylorracing.com for more of his progress and upcoming events. And on behalf of everyone here and those listening at home, thank you, Jordan, for sharing your stories and your time with us. And we wish you the best of luck this year in the continuing seasons. And we hope that you enjoyed this presentation and look forward to more Evening with a Legend throughout the season.
Thank you.
This episode is brought to you in part by the International Motor Racing Research Center. Its charter is to collect, share, and preserve the history of motorsports, spanning continents, eras, and race series. The center's collection embodies the speed, drama, and camaraderie of amateur and professional motor racing throughout the world. The center welcomes serious researchers and casual fans alike to share stories of race drivers, race series, and race cars captured on their shelves and walls and brought to life through a regular calendar of public lectures and special events. To learn more about the center, visit www.racingarchives.org. This episode is also brought to you by the Society of Automotive Historians. They encourage research into any aspect of automotive history. The SAH actively supports the compilation and preservation of papers, organizational records, print ephemera, and images to safeguard, as well as to broaden and deepen the understanding of motorized wheeled land transportation through the modern age and into the future. For more information about the SAH, visit www.autohistory.org.
This episode has been brought to you by the Automobile Club of the West and the ACO USA. From the awe-inspiring speed demons that have graced the track to the courageous drivers who have pushed the limits of endurance, the 24 Hours of Le Mans is an automotive spectacle like no other. For over a century, the 24 Hours Le Mans has urged manufacturers to innovate for the benefit of future motorists, and it's a celebration of the relentless pursuit of speed and excellence in the world of motorsports. To learn more about or to become a member of the ACO USA, look no further than www.lemans.org. Click on English in the upper right corner, and then click on the ACO Members tab for club offers. Once you've become a member, you can follow all the action on the Facebook group ACO USA Members Club and become part of the legend with future Evening with the Legend meetups. This episode has been brought to you by Grand Touring Motorsports as part of our Motoring Podcast Network. For more episodes like this, tune in each week for more exciting and educational content from organizations like the Exotic Car Marketplace, the Motoring Historian, Break Fix, and many others. If you'd like to support Grand Touring Motorsports and the Motoring Podcast Network, sign up for one of our many sponsorship tiers at www.patreon.com/GT Motorsports. Please note that the content, opinions, and materials presented and expressed in this episode are those of its creator, and this episode has been published with their consent. If you have any inquiries about this program, please contact the creators of this episode via email or social media as mentioned in the episode.